The wind moaned across the barren Arizona plains as poor rancher Caleb Hargrove tightened the frayed rope around his lonely barn door. The only real possession the struggling widower had left after 2 years of drought. Sickness and debts that stacked like storm clouds above his head. Every evening he whispered to the land the same thing, just one miracle. Just one, but the hard ground never answered. That night, however, the ground trembled, literally sending a low, rolling quake through the soil beneath his boots. Caleb froze, instinctively gripping his lantern as dust drifted from the rafters. Then he heard it labored breathing, heavy footfalls in a distant groan of pain. Cautious but curious, he walked toward the canyon path, the dark swallowing him except for his flickering lantern. Then he saw it, 2 enormous silhouettes lying in the dust, 2 giant Apache women, towering well over 7 feet, built like living mountains, their skin painted with ceremonial markings now smeared with blood and dirt. Their braided hair lay scattered like dark rivers around them, and their massive chests rose weakly with shallow breaths. Caleb gasped, nearly stumbling backward. He had heard stories of the Thundering Sisters, warriors of impossible strength, but never believed they were real. Yet here they were, one clutching her leg, an arrow embedded deep, the other trying to shield her sibling even while half-conscious. They could crush him with a single strike. Yet here they were broken, hunted, vulnerable. Caleb knew every rancher in the area would run or fetch a rifle. But something inside him, something quieter and older than fear, whispered, "Help them." He knelt beside the first sister, Nieli, judging from the beadwork on her necklace, and examined the arrow wound. It wasn't a simple injury. It was poisoned, and she was fading fast. Her sister Tala watched him with half-lidded yet fiercely protective eyes, her giant hand twitching toward a stone as if to defend them even now. "Easy," Caleb murmured, his voice trembling. "I ain't here to hurt you." The sisters exchanged a silent glance, and Tala let her hand fall open beside her. Caleb worked through the night like a desperate doctor removing the arrow, sucking out what poison he could, using every herb his late wife had taught him about, even tearing his last clean shirt to bandage Nieli's wound. These women were colossal, each limb thicker than his torso, and yet he treated them with the gentleness of tending newborn calves. Hours crawled by, sweat dripping from his brow, until finally Nieli's breathing steadied and color returned to her cheeks. Exhausted, Caleb collapsed beside them, whispering, "Don't die on me. Please don't." Dawn broke, gold and pink washing across the land, revealing just how impossibly massive the 2 sisters truly were. When Nieli's eyes finally opened, they weren't filled with rage, they were filled with confusion, then gratitude. She pushed herself onto her elbows, towering over Caleb even while sitting. "You've saved us." "Small man," she rumbled, her deep voice echoing like distant thunder. Caleb nodded sheepishly, brushing dirt from his palms. "I wasn't gonna leave you out." "There." Tala placed a hand, the size of a dinner plate, on his shoulder. "Gentle, careful. You have heart," she whispered, her voice softer but equally powerful. "Our people will not forget." But Caleb wasn't thinking about reward or recognition. He was thinking about the riders whose tracks he had seen around the canyon, mercenaries, armed and hungry for bounties. The sisters were being hunted, and he had just inserted himself between them and a group of men who would gladly burn his ranch to the ground to flush them out. As the sun rose higher, the distant sound of horses approached, dozens of them kicking up dust on the horizon. Nieli struggled to stand, her giant frame shaking while Tala braced her. Caleb looked from the riders to the sisters and felt his stomach twist. He had only minutes. "Follow me," he said urgently. "I know a place." And for the first time in their legendary lives, the 2 enormous Apache sisters followed a poor rancher, trusting him with their lives, as he led them into the ravine behind his barn, toward the hidden cave his father once used for shelter. The hooves grew louder, the wind stilled, and Caleb realized with a fierce, pounding heart that he had stepped into a story larger than anything he had ever imagined, one that would change the fate of entire nations. The air in the hidden ravine was cold and still, thick with the scent of ancient earth as Caleb crouched beside the 2 giant Apache sisters, listening to the mercenaries shouting above them. They went this way. One barked, the crunch of gravel echoing through the canyon walls. Nieli gripped Caleb's arm, lightly, though lightly for her, was still enough to nearly topple him, and whispered, "If they find us, run." Caleb shook his head stubbornly. "I ain't running. Not after pulling you back from death." Tyla's massive hand pressed to the cave entrance as if bracing for battle. Even injured, she radiated strength. "You are brave, little rancher," she murmured. "Brave or foolish?" Caleb gave a faint grin. Maybe both. Minutes stretched into hours until, at last, the riders faded into the desert, leaving behind only silence and the lingering fear of their return. When the threat finally passed, Caleb escorted the sisters deeper into the shade. helping them drink from a spring trickling through the rocks. He watched them with a mix of awe and bewilderment, two towering warriors, women whose names were whispered in campfire tallees. Now, depending on a man whose greatest achievement had been keeping his dying ranch barely afloat, Nayeli leaned against the cave wall, catching her breath. "Our father," she said slowly, "will want to meet you." Caleb blinked. "Your father?" Tala nodded gravely. "Chief Red Bear, leader of the Apache mountain tribes. Protector of the Thunder people." Caleb swallowed hard. Meeting an Apache chief was one thing. Meeting the Red Bear was something else entirely, especially when his daughters returned home injured, saved by an outsider. The last thing Caleb needed was a tribal war ripping through his land because he interfered. Maybe he don't need to know it was me, Caleb stammered. But the sisters exchanged a look that made it clear there was no escaping this fate. That evening, as crimson streaks crossed the sky, figures emerged on the distant ridge, silent, disciplined, moving like shadows made flesh. Nearly 100 Apache warriors descended the slope, each carrying spears, bows, or decorated war axes. Their faces were stern, unreadable, and in their center walked a man built like ironwood broad, scarred with braided hair that reached the middle of his back and a wolf pelt draped over his shoulders. Chief Red Bear, his eyes were dark and sharp, scanning the ravine until they fell upon Caleb, the lone small rancher among giants. For several agonizing seconds, the chief said nothing. Then Nayeli and Tala stepped forward, limping, bruised but alive. Father Tala whispered, "This man saved us." That single sentence shifted the air. Warriors lowered their weapons. Red Bear approached Caleb with slow, deliberate steps, towering over him like a mountain ready to judge a trembling valley. "My daughters are the last of the Thunder line," the chief said in a deep, rumbling voice that carried across the stones. "If they had died, our legacy would have died with them."